Hello, this is Wesor, and welcome to my review of Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. While I hope this provides a quick overview of what to expect in the expansion, please bear in mind that this is not a comprehensive review of each aspect of the game. I will hopefully be doing a new player's guide for those parts in the future. Also, as a word of warning, I do try to avoid late game spoilers, but this review will be using footage from different parts of the expansion, including dungeons, zones, and some lines of dialogue. With that said, let's take a look at how one of the most anticipated releases of 2019 holds up. As it begins, Shadowbringers wastes no time in introducing your Warrior of Light to the expansion content. Within the first few minutes of the game, players are called away to the new world of the First, a realm where darkness has been defeated and the light threatens to overtake everything in its path as a result. Square immediately sets the tone of a place stricken with its own calamity as refugees hold out in the last few bastions of civilization. Throughout this new land, players are given expansive new areas to visit, each with a distinctive atmosphere that is both familiar and utterly foreign. Both the music and art direction in these areas is top-notch, giving players plenty to do and unique characters to interact with as they try to save a dying land. Despite an obligatory desert zone, these new areas showcase the growth in the art team over the years, with stunning vistas and ample room to explore. While they are almost overlarge on foot, Square seems to have learned from its mistakes with Stormblood, moving flight currents closer to the main progression paths to allow players to unlock flying much faster than that of their previous expansion. The revamped Fate system, which now drops currency used for a variety of goods, gives players new and old reason to go out and roam, making these zones continue to feel alive well after a player has done their initial stories. Of course, new zones also means new dungeons and trials. Square does not shake up its formula very much, with these dungeons each having 3 bosses and a handful of trash pulls. Still, the consistency is nice, and the bosses have no lack of fun mechanics to deal with. Many incorporate movesets from previous raid bosses, and each dungeon offers a unique flair that ties in directly with its respective zone. While some of the middle dungeons feel a bit generic in some respects, this is offset by the expert dungeons at endgame, which may be among the best the developers have made yet. While there are only 3 single boss trials in the game at launch, they are each incredibly fun, with Square's gold standard soundtrack pushing players to do their best. True to form, the extreme versions of these trials offer challenging encounters that test players without feeling overwrought just for the sake of being hard. The newest addition to this part of the game is the Trust system, in which players are allowed to enter dungeons solo with a party made up of story characters throughout the game. This could have been tricky, but the AI of your fellow Scions is considerably better than that of the old Squadron missions. It can be a bit annoying trying to level up each Scion, each requiring several runs of a dungeon before moving up to the next. Also, Trust runs do take significantly more time than one made up of players. Still, Trust reward loot directly to you, as well as offer a chance to play alone for a time if you don't want to deal with random players. It is also a very good way to bypass queue times. While this could have gone badly, the smart AI and charm of watching the Scions play as themselves makes Trust a successful, if somewhat slower, alternative to the Duty Finder for players that want it. Of course, none of this would matter if not for the combat revamp. Square introduced 2 new and very fun classes with Gunbreakers and Dancers. They also reworked almost every class in order to cut down on the number of buttons needed. While some changes were certainly more successful than others, the overall feel is that of much needed improvements to most jobs. Quality of life is better, with many unnecessary buttons removed or changed, and combat feels much smoother on most classes without giving up core gameplay. However, these new classes and changes have introduced slightly more disparity between jobs. While any class can still complete any content, a small patch of balance tweaks might be necessary to keep this gap from growing as the expansion releases future content. Square has been very good about keeping an eye on this in the past, so for now it is a very minor complaint and only really affects the top tier of progression raiders. Also introduced were 2 new races, the Hrothgar and Viera. They offer a bit more choice for players, with the Hrothgar especially giving a cool new beastly tribe to play. However, their customization options feel a bit pared down. The new head models used also limit the hairstyles for those players, which feels somewhat disappointing after all the hype. They still look cool, of course, and it certainly hasn't stopped an army of bunnies from overtaking the cities, but a few more options in the future would be nice to really round them out. Now, what else usually goes in these reviews? I know I'm forgetting something. Oh, that's right, the story. Final Fantasy XIV has always been focused heavily on taking characters on a journey, and Shadowbringers is no exception. While Final Fantasy XIV is very much an MMO, the game's main draw is in feeling like a single-player Final Fantasy as you take your Warrior of Light through the world of the First. After a somewhat mediocre story in Stormblood, game director Naoki Yoshida brought in Natsuko Ishikawa as the lead writer for Shadowbringers. After previously working on several of the game's biggest individual moments, she was given the reins for this entire expansion. It paid off beautifully. By jumping to another world, players are completely immersed in the individuals and situations there, while still tying the overarching story back to the Scion's homeworld. Even side characters and quest lines are given an immense weight that draws players in for these big emotional moments throughout the journey. The voice acting is stellar, and the story beats really hit home with every twist and new NPC. Players also get to return to their core group of Scions, which feels somewhat like meeting with old friends we haven't seen in a long time. While the cast of characters could have ended up too large, Ishikawa expertly gives each of them a moment to shine and a subplot to their own struggles. Even characters we are meant to hate are given some depth of humanity and an understanding to their desires. There are no callings of morally gray or odd, out-of-character moments for the sake of plot. Instead, we are given unsettling villains and three-dimensional characters with meaningful motivation that elevate Shadowbringers well beyond the genre's conventions. In fact, it is for this reason that Shadowbringers succeeds above even fans' high expectations. While the dungeons, art direction, and new features are as enjoyable as ever, Final Fantasy XIV is still ultimately an MMO in terms of gameplay. What separates this expansion from its peers is that story, which reaches even past the praise of Heavensward. Shadowbringers offers a roller coaster experience that goes well beyond just being a good MMO expansion with some fun fights and snappy combat. Instead, it gives you an incredibly well-written tale for your Warrior of Light that makes it not just one of the best expansions to any MMO in history, but may very well put it among the best volumes of the iconic Final Fantasy brand. All of these elements come together to create one of my favorite experiences playing a video game in recent years. It's a benchmark for how good the MMO genre can still be, building on the past for veteran players while offering a ton for new players looking to start their hero's journey. Even with its very minor flaws, Shadowbringers reminds us of what the Final Fantasy franchise can do when it's firing on all cylinders. So ready your weapon, Warrior of Light, and get ready to journey to the First. Shadowbringers is a 10 out of 10, and I can't wait to meet you there.